Are there any members of the public, Mr. Marino, who have registered and are here to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have 33 registered speakers this morning. Before I call the first speaker, I would like to remind everyone that they have a 2-minute time frame, and please try to keep to that so we can get everyone a chance to speak today. Thank you. The first speaker is Jason Pinheiro. Mr. Pinheiro will be followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning, Freddie, Andy, Jano, Andrew Albert, Dr. Metzger, Polly, and the rest of the committee. Saturday early morning, I rode the D train from my home station, that is Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center. In the interior of the car, I noticed graffiti, and I sent the tweet to Sarah Meyer with the pictures that she could look at it. And of course, in the elevator reports, you guys miss WTC Cortland. It's not Cortland Street anymore. But we need more elevators for our disability folks that they could move around throughout our system, because finally we have to comply with the ADA Act, because the agency is at fault and not complying with it. And also, I want to know, when I take the Staten Island bus, the S40 is always crowded. And I often see buses going out of service from Castleton Depot. And another thing that I want to notice, homeless people sleeping on the subway at 4 o'clock in the morning. I want the agency to do an outreach throughout this time early in the morning, especially at the Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center area. And I wonder why the new name of the new fare payment system wasn't discussed with the public to see what the public wants in terms of the name, because the name is kind of off. But I'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Lisa Daglian, who will be followed by Kevin Zeng.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Daglian. I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, or PCAC. Well, we were very glad to see that the L train open houses have been announced. We've gotten a lot of questions from riders asking if it's safe to be in the stations, in particular at Bedford Avenue. We've gotten reports of a whole new L smell, as it were. So it's critical that the independent consultant be appointed, and that the results of the air quality monitoring be made public. We also support rider calls to keep the full complement of travel mitigation efforts in place during the construction. Fare increases are on top of mind for all riders. We understand that the new proposal we're going to be or that you will be discussing keeps the base fare flat and eliminates bonuses. Well, we support a proposal, in fact, that would cause the least amount of pain to the system's most regular riders, its commuters. We don't know that the flat fare proposal does that. In any event, we support at least a flat fare for Access-a-Ride users and whatever discounts may be included in the budget. To keep the fare hikes to a minimum and to fend off a threatened 27% increase, we support the urgent need to identify and codify sustainable funding, including congestion pricing. We've been in Albany and will be testifying around the region to that effect, and ask that you help us make the case by describing projects in the outer boroughs and in the suburbs that would be funded using congestion pricing money. In closing, we're also very pleased to hear about improvements in subway service through the Subway Action Plan. It's a solid example of what can happen with the right funding and the right leadership in place. Congratulations, even as we look to go further, look to further improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kevin Zeng, who will be followed by Omar Vera.
Hello, good morning to Friend of Rare and Andy Byford. My name is Kevin Zhang. I would like to request to all subway accessible stations and all public restroom stations, because I'm running down the stairs and slippery stairs on the floor during the rain and snow when I catch the R train and the doors close, and then miss the R train at Prospect Avenue station, and it needs ADA accessible stations, but all enhanced station initiative needs elevators and public restrooms. I saw one man restroom open only, but it missing one woman restroom at 59th Street on the N and R train stations, and Franklin Avenue on the 2, 3, 4, and 5 train station. West 4th Street, Washington Square, and 34th Street, Hell Square station, public restrooms was removed. It needs to reinstall public restrooms at West 4th Street and 34th Street, Hell Square stations. City Council member Brad Lander is also considering 7th Avenue station on an F and G trains needs ADA accessible stations. Also, Andy Byford, there's a B23 bus petitions is at City Council member Matthew Eugene office, and we didn't make it. So if you have any questions about the B23 bus restore along 16th Avenue and Gatoya Road and extend along Beverly Road, Brooklyn Avenue, and Linden Boulevard petitions, so please contact Adam Yulin and Vladimir Avador as soon as possible, so that the B23 bus petitions sent to the MTA New York City Transit President Andy Byford. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. The next speaker is Omar Vera, who will be followed by Timothy Lunsford Stearns.
Let me begin with bonjour. Before I start, I was in Montreal last week, and I was impressed by the STM metro. So that's why, and I feel like we should import more of the. We're already doing tap and go with the Omni cards here. They already have tap and go over there. So now on to business. I'm impressed with the R179 testing on the A train. Keep it, please. Like 12 years ago, I saw the R160 there, but then it was taken out. The A was the only line that was taken out from. Everybody else got it. But the official reasoning at the time they said was, oh, electrical issues in the Rockaways. And I'm like, all right, fine. But that was before the Rockaways got really renovated, especially after the superstorm Sandy, the Frankenstorm. But I feel this is the time the A needs to have new technology cars. Within a decade, I feel like they should have the R211s and R179s, because that's one of the most used lines in the system, and that actually has direct connections to JFK Airport via the air train and the Q10. So depending on what corridor I go to, hopefully it'll just be the air train, because I want to see the Lefferts one day. And of course, the connection to the M60 at 125th to LaGuardia Airport. So both JFK and LaGuardia have connections with the A. But anyway, I'm also here to support like this congestion pricing, because the city has already been paying enough. We need the fares to be down, not up. So always increasing the fares every 2 years is not the way to go. I feel like we're like the only major like metro area in the entire country that constantly increases fares every 2 years, and they can't. This has got to stop. I've mentioned this, and I will mention this again in finance. But with that, everything else seems ship-shape, and I'll see you around.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. The next speaker is Timothy Lunsford Stern, who will be followed by Rashawn Simmons.
Good morning, Board. I am Timothy Lunsford Stevens. Thank you for allowing me to speak and listening. I spent last week in the Northeast on business, and I found buses and subways in the Boston area accessible. I went to Concord, New Hampshire, and in a meeting found they are in progress of installing a rapid rail network from Boston to New Hampshire and some parts of Vermont. Accessible access was part of the plan, and in this future construction, Boston Transit is already accessible. Returning last night, I read the Daily News article by the MTA's plan to cut Andy Byford's rapid access plan by 14 elevators. No reason was given in the edict. You're not even supporting your MTA president. Your board of corporate executives, you have no board members who have identified themselves as disabled or advocates for the disabled. Recently, you attended holiday parties and you reached out by telephone and email to peers. Some of you know Andrew Cuomo actually, yet you do nothing to get Cuomo to willingly fund the MTA in his current budget, much less any disabled access. Some of you were appointed by Andrew Cuomo and you don't get Cuomo to work with the MTA on disabled access. Transparency. Mr. Lieber had a nice presentation last session on a capital expense at Penn Station with a beautiful glass entrance. He mentioned $170 million for the MTA and the difference for New York State of this $170 million and $594 million cost. He said contracts and costs are not executed at this time. You're talking of millions of dollars of construction. Elevators can be constructed for just over $1 million, yet your estimators say millions and you don't have the money to make renovation stations accessible for the disabled. What gives? In my case, profound deafness, I just have like 2 more paragraphs. In my case, profound deafness, none of your plans to work or make announcements for the deaf better. Recent trains, the LED trains, were malfunctioning uptown, and there are still trains that have not been updated to digital signage. Disability access is not just wheelchairs. I would like to apply with the next vacancy on this board, and let me know how to apply. Make your construction costs transparent and try transit access for their plans for 50 elevators in the area most used by the disabled to start a meeting with the disabled community as equals. As you stated, your reputation and credibility are at stake here. People have died on the MTA properties. People have injured themselves on the MTA property with no access. We are part of 200 million MTA riders. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rashawn Simmons, who will be followed by Ellen Shannon.
Good morning. Now, we're here to talk about the MTA fare hikes. We can barely afford what's going on right now. We don't need an increase, we need a decrease. How you go from the subways to accessorized to public busing. We're already going through this as it is. But the point is, we need elevators for the disabled too, the wheelchairs. There's so many of them that miss so many rides. It's not even funny. And it's not just me, it's for all the majority that's going through the same problems as everyone else. So, Mr. Belfort, you're the president. You and all of your staff members, with all due respect, you have the power to change things and make it fair for everyone else, not just beneficial for you and your staff, with all due respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. The next speaker is Ellen Shannon, who will be followed by Christine Yearwood.
Somebody left their glasses up here? Okay, I'll bring them over. Good morning. I'm Ellen Shannon, speaking on behalf of the New York City Transit Riders Council. The council would like to recognize New York City Transit staff for their hard work and dedication under the direction of Andy Byford. which has helped them to see a 32% improvement in on-time subway performance. While there's still a very long way to go, which President Byford openly acknowledges, it's important to take a moment to value the improving state of the subway. Transit's ability to identify root causes of delays and to safely speed up trains and address timer calibrations, as well as the right-of-way cleanup work, have all contributed to the system-wide improvements. However, the Council also recognizes it will be impossible to sustain these improvements without adequate funding for the operating and capital budgets. Every New Yorker has a vision of the kind of system we want to have. The Fast Forward Plan puts that vision within our grasp. Only the legislature, the governor, and the city can make that happen. Next year's nearly $500 million operating deficit and the current hiring freeze create problems. We've seen it before. Important vacancies go unfilled, critical trainings don't happen, and important accountability departments shrink. The fare increase must go forward, and sustainable funding must be found for the operating budget. Funding Fast Forward is equally as important. The major delays show that fixing the signals and the crumbling infrastructure in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx at a more rapid rate is critical to reducing everyday slowdowns and major delays. Having a better understanding of these projects by borough in advance of the state budget will be very motivating for our elected officials. We hope the elected officials are watching now and listening and working hard to identify stable funding streams, including congestion pricing. We'll be in Albany this week to help them understand how important this funding is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon. The next speaker is Christine Yearwood. Ms. Yearwood will be followed by Kate Slevin.
Hi, good morning. When President Byford proposed that 50 new stations would be accessible with elevators as part of his Fast Forward plan, and for the entire system to be made accessible over the next 15 to 20 years, we were hopeful. We are activists, after all, and we wouldn't do the work we did if we didn't have hope that things could change. But the MTA and Governor Cuomo have refused to settle a lawsuit that would guarantee the work. Instead, it's been dependent upon congestion pricing and other transit funding. We are hopeful for the funding. But if history shows anything, we need Governor Cuomo to settle that lawsuit and to have a legally binding agreement to force leadership to make the system fully accessible and on a firm timeline. We have been here at these meetings for years, calling for the subways to be made safe and accessible for all, and that the bus systems also be made accessible for us. And it should be noted that some of our peers have been advocating for decades. We should not be hearing in the news that promises around improving accessibility are already wavering, that perhaps only 36 of the 50 stations will be made accessible. When station rehab money has finally been earmarked for elevators and ramps that will bring them up to code under the ADA, why is accessibility something that planners decide is acceptable to cut? The fact that this is predicted to happen after Malaysia Goodson just died on the subway stairs is disgraceful. Our message is this: we are here. You might not see us at these meetings because many parents are at work, home with sick children, taking their kids to activities, or prioritizing their children's day-to-day napping schedules. Caretakers are on the clock and are responsible for whatever else those families are paying them to do with their children. But we live in this city, and we try to participate in this city's economy and contribute to it. No one should be at the risk of dying, as Malaysia Goodson tragically did, while doing something typical that each of us is forced to do on a regular basis. We need more accessible subway stations and buses so that the women and children of this city are not only mobile, but safe. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kate Slevin. Kate Slevin will be followed by Pierre Gooding.
Good morning. My name is Kate Slevin, and I'm a Senior Vice President at Regional Plan Association. I am here today to discuss the L train and ask for a transparent process moving forward. RPA has always advocated for using the best and most efficient methods for improving our critical infrastructure. As time goes on, cost and stress on the system continue to rise. We have called for new approaches that bring in new ideas, but evaluation of those proposals must be transparent so the public can weigh costs and benefits. The independent consultant for the L train must be appointed. We are concerned with the news that the new L train repair plan will result in cuts to the smart alternative transportation plans that were developed with communities and elected officials. The transitway on 14th Street, for example, would have served as a model for improving bus service throughout the city, a model the city desperately needs. A few questions we like to pose to the board today. If new technologies and repair methods are assessed to be superior to the MTA's original repair plan, what would full closure of the L train look like in the new scenario? Is it possible that the new approach would only take 6 months, for example, if there is still a full closure? This option must be evaluated in a transparent way so the public can understand the costs and benefits. Second, given that any repair option will cause significant disruption, can the surface transit improvements, including the 14th Street Transitway and HOV restrictions on the Williamsburg Bridge, remain? Canceling important transit improvements that would go beyond simply providing temporary relief and can serve as models for new projects around the city is a step backwards. For years, transit advocates have prepared impacted communities for the L train shutdown and worked with the MTA and DOT to ensure mitigation measures would be put in place. Our goals today remain the same as they did years ago. Minimize the impact of the L train shutdowns and other shutdowns on New Yorkers by providing alternative transportation options and preventing even more congestion. Show how temporary subway closures could allow for desperately needed repair work to be done at lower cost and at a much faster pace. And create new permanent surface transportation options that show how fast, reliable, and efficient bus service can be. Lastly, as MTA budget issues are key this week, we urge the MTA leadership and MTA Board to be vocal advocates for passage of congestion pricing. It won't serve all the agency's challenges, but it is a vital and important step. We also support Veronica Vanderpool's proposal to align the MTA fiscal calendar with the city and state budget calendars so that fare hikes
Please
are
summarize
being
your
voted
remarks,
on
Ms. Levin.
with a clear understanding of what additional state funding is coming to the agency. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Pierre Gooding, who will be followed by Monica Bartley.
My name is Pierre Gooding, and I am the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for the Uptown Democratic Club. I thank the Metro Transit Authority for allowing this opportunity and Upstand for raising awareness about this crucial issue. I'm here today to speak about subway access. I've ridden the subway my entire life and currently ride it on a daily basis. I see dangerous and legally tenuous situations for parents every day as parents pick their children up in their strollers and carry their children down flights of steps. Malaysia Goodman was a tragedy. But statistically, we raise the likelihood that these sorts of tragedies occur every day we fail to take or make the subway accessible. This action is also necessary for our disabled population. For me, it's personal because my aunt is disabled. She has refused to ride the subway for 30 years because, in her words, I can't get up and down the steps. I've heard that Access-a-Ride is the answer, but every New Yorker in here knows the truth about that. The quickest way to get around New York City is via the subway. And without access to that subway, we create legal and moral dilemmas. We have parents that can't take their children to school. We have disabled persons that cannot get from point A to point B quickly because they cannot ride the subway. Not only is the issue of the subway a legal issue and a moral issue, it's one that we have to fix. We have to prioritize. In Harlem, many people have given up. I understand the frustration because when I spoke to members of the mayor's office for disabled persons about this very topic, the answer was, it's coming. This is not an acceptable response. New Yorkers deserve subway access and also to know the full plan and the intermittent steps that we're going to take to make the subway accessible. So I urge the board to
Please
consider
summarize
these
your
facts
remarks.
and recommendations, and I look forward to significant progress in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Monica Bartley, who will be followed by Michael Ring.
Good morning. My name is Monica Bartley, Community Outreach Organizer at the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. We would like to congratulate the MTA for agreeing with us not to raise the fares on Access-a-Ride. However, we're calling on you to expand the on-demand and e-hail programs. These two projects have allowed people with disabilities who rely on Access-a-Ride the ability to go where they want, when they want, just like people who use the buses or subways. One of my co-workers who is visually impaired said, "The service has absolutely empowered me to function independently and has allowed me to reach my children and grandchildren in an emergency situation. It allows me to get to places within the city that I would have a difficult time reaching alone." We're asking for full involvement of the planning of the next steps. As such, we're requesting transparency by supplying critical data about past, current, and projected costs. We regret that the MTA has withdrawn from the lawsuit. It is really important that MTA work to ensure that Governor Cuomo fund the full 50 elevators promised by the MTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Michael Ring, who will be followed by Richard Kahn.
Hi, I came here today because I heard the fare was going to rise for the Access-a-Ride riders, and I'm very glad it's not. But it occurred to me that there shouldn't be a fare at all. I'm not saying that because I want a free ride, or I'm saying that because I do a little math. If an Access-a-Ride driver can pick up 10 to 15 people a day, that means they're collecting $30 to $45. It takes a couple minutes for each of the riders for them to collect the fare, and then they have to count the money at the end of the day, and then they have to give it to someone who has to, their job is to collect money, and then an accountant has to keep track of the money, and then a truck has to bring the money to the bank. Perhaps the MTA would save money by not going to all this expense and charging people who, some Access-a-Ride users, this 25 cents would make a big difference. Like, why charge money at all if you're hardly breaking even on collecting the money? It's not that much money for you guys. So I just thought I'd throw that out there, and maybe you could make it free to the people who need it the most and stop worrying about collecting the money and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Richard Kahn. Mr. Kahn will be followed by Victor Andrew.
Good morning. I'm only going to have this one question. On the 18th Avenue, on 18th Avenue, the F train, on the construction, we heard about an elevator. I live in a handicapped building, and there's no elevator on 18th Avenue. There's no elevator before Church. Church Avenue has an elevator. All the other stations don't. Now the question is why? How come they didn't put the elevator in 18th Avenue? That's my question.
We can have someone talk to you, Mr. Kahn.
What do you say?
We can have someone talk to you, Mr. Kahn. Thank you. Victor Andrew.
Sorry. Okay. Well, good morning, Andrew Byford and team. I think e-hail should stay where it is because you can leave when you want and go as you please. On time, if you have Access-a-Ride, you'll never get there. You'll get there maybe 3 days later or 2 hours later, you know? So
next speaker is Susan Duha, who will be followed by Suzanne Chi.
Good morning. My name is Susan Dua. I'm the Executive Director of Center for Independence of the Disabled New York, Sydney. And I want to begin by thanking you most sincerely regarding the decision to avoid raising fares. We hope that this means that you have listened to the voices of the community, because we believe that you are capable of doing so. However, we are deeply distressed by the MTA's decision to withdraw from settlement talks with us regarding accessibility of New York City's subway stations. We are advised that the MTA argument is that it has core powers to manage the transit system, to establish transportation priorities, plannings, and policies throughout the metropolitan region that are not subject to the New York City human rights law. I want you to think about the implications of excluding planning priorities and policies from the ambit of civil rights law. We are left with the impression that there are some at the MTA who believe that demands by people with disabilities for accessibility are too much too soon. In a certain sense, it is pleasing to be classed with other people who have fought for civil rights and classed as too hasty or intemperate. We ask the MTA now, and we believe that the MTA must stand by its commitment to fully fund the Fast Forward plan, and that the MTA Board will explain this commitment in clear and no uncertain terms to the Governor of the State of New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Suzanne Chi, who will be followed by Shane Anderson.
Good morning. My name is Susan Chi. I'm an advocate for Centers for Disabled of New York. MTA need to fund and open up the pilot program waitlist, expand e-hail, change traditional accessory into accessory on demand. As a New Yorker, we demand to travel. We demand the right to travel when we need to and when we want it, just like the New Yorker who doesn't have disability. People with disability always have to plan the trip ahead of time due to lack of accessible transportation. MTA need to come up with a realistic plan how to make public transport more accessible for people with disability. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Shane Anderson, who will be followed by Iman Ramwani.
Good morning. My name is Shane Anderson. I'm the Accessoride Community Organizer with Sydney, the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. Firstly, I want to thank the MTA for not raising the base fare, but this is the first step. I am sure that you, as members of the board, will join us in pressuring Governor Cuomo to fully fund a fully accessible mass transit system for people with disabilities and others. As a community organizer with Sydney, I hear about Accessoride every single day. And amidst the good and the bad, there's a universal: expand on-demand service. Do not limit it. Some say now that they say that on-demand and e-hail is too expensive. The fact, however, is that your average round-trip e-hail ride is far cheaper than a one-way price tag of traditional Accessoride. In short, on-demand Accessoride means more time living your life and less time planning your life. We call on the MTA to expand on-demand service, save money, and treat all traveling New Yorkers, those with disabilities and those without disabilities, with respect. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Iman Ramwai, followed by Daniel Ross.
Good morning. My name is Iman Ramawi. I'm from New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Thank you to the members of the board who expressed concern about the impact an increase in the base fare would have on thousands of low and fixed income New Yorkers with disabilities who use accessorized systems on a regular basis as the primary means of their transportation. As I stated last month, many people with disabilities and seniors are on fixed incomes and may not be able to afford even 25 cents more. As folks know, since we mentioned it last month, Access-a-Ride users don't get any discounts and we can't use Metro cards. Many New Yorkers with disabilities who use Access-a-Ride are on Social Security, which means they are getting about $800 or less a month. People with disabilities who use Access-a-Ride won't be able to afford a fare increase. And how do I know this? I know this because this used to be my life. And there are many times I remember having to choose between going to the doctor or paying a bill, between going on a job interview and hanging out with family. There are times when I had to say no to going anywhere because I had $10 that would have to last me 2 weeks. Don't put the increase on the most disenfranchised people in the city. Thank you. With respect to Access-a-Ride services, we need to have a more specific plan about the second phase of the on-demand pilot that Access-a-Ride has made available to only 1,200 of the 144,000 customers. When will it be available to everyone? We want the pilot to be made permanent, available to all Access-a-Ride customers, and to be free of any efforts to ration a service. Thank you.
The next speaker is Daniel Ross, who will be followed by Ed Delgado.
Hi, good morning. My name is Daniel Ross. I'm a senior staff attorney at Mobilization for Justice, which is part of the Access-a-Ride Reform Group, known as ARG. The MTA's plan, first, thank you for not raising the base fare. As Iman just said, it's critical for the people who can least afford it not to bear that burden. But I want to talk about the on-demand pilot. Which is currently available to less than 1% of all Access-a-Ride users. But for that 1%, it has been a game changer and a life changer. For the first time, people with disabilities who rely on Access-a-Ride can decide to meet a friend, go get a cup of coffee, go to the supermarket to do some grocery shopping, or maybe go to a last-minute doctor's appointment, all at the time they want to do it, just like everyone else has always been able to do on buses and subways. The service is transforming lives, and yet already the MTA is discussing capping the service. Show us what it's actually costing before you tell us it's too expensive. Because as you've heard, it can be cheaper than traditional fares. People living their lives shouldn't be capped just because it may change the budget for the MTA. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ed Delgado, who would be followed by Liz Fredericks.
Hello. Thank you for listening to our grievances. I used to work for HUD as an investigator around issues of Americans with disability and reasonable accommodations. This is an ADA compliance issue. To try to skirt it, it's wrong. One of the things that I've learned once this law was enacted is that it's an incredible law. It's an incredible regulation because every one of us, if we live long enough, will become disabled. So, you know, you got to think of the future, even your own future. You know, I don't think this problem will be resolved unless you have people with disability on this board. Because you don't get it. You just don't get it. And, you know, it's the only way we can move forward. So please, provide accessibility not just to the disabled, but to all people, because, like I said, We'll all go get there sometime. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Liz Fredericks, who will be followed by Luth Lowenkron.
Good morning. I am requesting that the e-hail and the on-demand service be expanded. I have taken Access-a-Ride with trips that have taken as long as 7 hours. I can literally get to Florida faster than I can get from one borough to the other. The subway, the buses, half the time inaccessible, unable to take them. There are not a wealth of options for people. I can't describe it to you. Imagine you're stuck. I mean, you're literally stuck. It's not our disability that limits us. It's the ability to get around the city, our city. This is our city just as much as it is anybody's. And as the gentleman just said, this is going to happen eventually to all of us. When that arthritis starts getting those knees and those stairs start looking really long, when that subway station starts shaking at 14th Street and your balance is affected, you're going to say, what was it that crazy lady said at that meeting about travel? I mean, think about it. Your ride never shows up. It takes 5 hours before they send another one. Then a 2-hour commute from an outer borough into the city. Then, because it took so long for you to get to your appointment, guess what? Now your pickup time is off. So now you have to start the whole process all over again. I call Access-a-Ride the Gilligan's Island tour. Because if it's not that, it's that they pick you up in Manhattan, and then they'll take you through Brooklyn, and then potentially back through Queens before they get you to your borough.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ruth Lowenkron, who will be followed by Tia Duong.
Good morning. Ruth Lowenkron, the Director of the Disability Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. First, as others did, a huge thank you. It's very gratifying to have been heard on the issue of raising fares. Although I will say parenthetically, maybe you didn't exactly hear what I said, which was given the fact that people who use Access-a-Ride for all these years have always been paying more, it would have been nice to have contemplated a decrease in the fares, but there's still time. There's still 2 days to think on that one. As you know, people with disabilities who use Access-a-Ride are paying more because there are no discounts available to them. The basic discounts, the monthly MTA, the weekly MTA, the per ride discounts, none of those are available. So please contemplate what more can be done in that direction. Similarly, the Fair Fares program is not including people with disabilities who use Access-a-Ride. That is also unconscionable, to say nothing of illegal. And why is this all so important about fares? Because we are talking about abysmal services. Yes, we have seen improvements. We, as part of the Access-a-Ride Reform Group, my office, my colleagues, we have been working with the MTA and improvements have been made, but there is much yet to be done. What you are hearing out there, those tours of the multiple boroughs, no. People with disabilities should not be undergoing what no one else would stand for. And similarly, with respect to the fact that they have to make advance reservations for services, again, people with disabilities are not to be made to do that which no one else would stand for. The pilot program, we've used words like life-changing, life-altering. We have come out here. We have praised you. We are very excited about that endeavor. But please don't think we won't be out here fighting in huge number.
Please summarize your remarks.
Absolutely. If you are not there to make that pilot program permanent, to make it available to everyone, and do not, under any conditions, consider rationing as we understand you are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tia Duong, who will be followed by Mary Kessinger. We'll go to Mary Kessinger, please, who will be followed by Tony Murphy.
Thank you. I want to make the point today that we need more elevators in this system. The point is that elevators make travel by subway safe, they make it possible, and we need elevators in every single station that there is. And the first priority has to be safety. What happened to Marissa Goodson was a tragedy. She was holding a baby in one arm and a collapsed stroller in the other, and she fell down the stairs, and she died as a result. Now that's a tragedy that could have been avoided if there was an elevator in that station. And so we demand that there be elevators everywhere. Now, the other thing is that the population of parents with strollers, with toddlers in strollers, is quite a large one. In fact, it might even be larger than the disabled population of the city. It affects almost every family in the 5 boroughs. And we need more elevators so that people can get from one point to another point quickly and safely. Now, the problem with strollers is that they're very hard to maneuver up and down the stairs, which is, again, why we need elevators. Everybody has a right to travel on the subway and should be in a safe condition. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tony Murphy, who will be followed by Tia DeWong.
I'm with the People's MTA. If I gave you one of these, can you hold them up right now? And I'd like to have 20 seconds of silence for Malaysia Goodson. So I also have a huge thank you today. It doesn't go to the board. It goes to the people I see here who have been fighting on this issue for months. I'm talking about Sasha. I'm talking about Jean Ryan. I'm talking about Robert Acevedo. I'm talking about Iman Ramawi. I'm talking about Joe Delgado, Shane Anderson. Give yourself a big round of applause for keeping the base fare where it is. I don't give credit to the MTA board because less than a month after Malaysia Goodson died, they have announced that they're not going to fund 14 of the 50 elevators, and they're abandoning negotiations on the elevator suit. The excuse is that there's not enough money, and that's not true. This is the richest city and the richest country in the world. There's always money for other things. There's always money for more police. There's always money for war. There's always money to bail out billionaires. AIG got $185 billion, and there's not enough money to create elevators and prevent deaths, needless deaths like the one that happened a week ago. It means it's not that there's not enough money. It means that they're not making elevators a priority. They're not making the riders a priority. And speaking of Malaysia Goodson, it's not exculpatory, meaning it doesn't get the MTA off the hook to say that she had a pre-existing condition. People with pre-existing conditions take the subway. People who are sometimes not feeling well take the subway. People who are mobility impaired.
Mr. Murphy, please summarize your remarks.
I will, thank you. Give me some extra time for the silence. People who are mobility impaired take the subway.
Please summarize your remarks.
People who are sight impaired take the subway. Elderly riders take the subway. People who are tired at the end of the day from working 2 jobs.
Mr. Murphy,
Mr.
Murphy, please summarize your remarks.
What do we want? Elevators. When do we want them? What do we want? When do we want them? Elevators now.
Mr. Murphy, please summarize your remarks.
Now. Elevators now. Elevators now.
Mr. Murphy.
Elevators now. Elevators now. Thank you again.
The next speaker is Tia Duong, who will be followed by Tiffany Winbush.
Hi, they need to stop raising the fare for the MTA Metro cards, and Accessoride needs to be on time because there are some people are not patient and they have to get to work and people don't want to lose their job.
For remarks. The next speaker is Tiffany Winbush, who will be followed by Sasha Blair Goldenshine.
Good morning, everyone. I am here, like many of us are here today, to talk about accessibility. I think we should continue to say the name of Miss Malaysia Goodson. And even though she was suffering from a pre-existing condition, that does not mean that we can forget about her name and forget about parents and mothers and fathers and caregivers and what they have to do in order to get around the city. As a mother of two who lives in the city, who has no desire to leave the city for the suburbs where it may be easier for me to get around, I want not only myself, but everyone who comes after me and everyone currently who is a parent to be able to get around the city and to be able to get around it in the most affordable fashion. And that is going to be the subway. Yes, we could certainly, hail one of the car sharing services or a taxi, but that gets expensive as you are already trying to raise a family in a very expensive city. So I want us to continue to say the name Malaysia Goodson, and I want us to continue to remember her, and I want us to remember each and every parent who's using public transportation to get around. It is not an easy task. It is difficult, and we should not have to carry our strollers up and down the subway stairs. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sasha Blair Goldenshine, who will be followed by Jean Ryan.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Sasha Blair Goldenson. I'm with the Elevator Action Group of Rise and Resist. And that is our motto. Elevators are for everyone. It's not just people in wheelchairs. It's not just parents and caregivers with strollers. It's not just older people. It's not just tourists with suitcases. It's not just delivery workers. And my most frequent companion in the stations, in the elevators of stations with have them, MTA workers, taking out the garbage, doing construction, doing the things that they need to do. And with all due respect, I want to say to the committee and to President Byford and to Advisor Ella Gooden, the reason that the case has not been settled yet, that the lawsuit about building more elevators and making stations accessible has not been settled, and the reason that it's at an impasse, as we understand it, is that you guys are saying it's too expensive. We can't afford it. And we're sympathetic to that. We want a realistic solution, not a pie-in-the-sky solution. But we don't have the luxury of deciding not to build accessible stations and elevators. It's a false choice. We're already paying. Malaysia Goodson paid. We all pay every day when we're late because the elevators are out of service, or we have to go 3 stations away, 5 stations away, 7 stations away. We all pay. All of us in wheelchairs, but also older people who have to decide, am I going to take those steps or not? And it's the caregivers and the parents with strollers who end up hoisting that stroller and walking down the steps with the baby in one arm, and that's not right. Those people are being endangered, and the rest of us are being excluded. We're here to demand every station be accessible, and where is the governor on this? Where is his brain trust that figured out a way to do the L train in a better, quicker, more affordable way? The governor and his brain trust can do this and find a way to make every station accessible. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jean Ryan, who will be followed by Joe Rappaport.
Hi, I'm Jean Ryan. I'm president of Disabled in Action. I'm an enthusiastic subway rider. I only live a couple blocks from a station, but I haven't been able to ride for 25 years now. And if you think that doesn't impact you, you got another thing coming. And I've heard for all these years, oh, we don't have enough money. Oh, okay, we're going to put some stations in, but something else is more important. We've got to do that first. The elevators cost too much money. All these excuses. And I want Andrew Cuomo to stand up like his dad did and stand up for accessibility and fund the MTA with dedicated funds in a legally binding settlement so that we can get all the stations accessible and so that everybody can get around our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. The next speaker is Joe Rappaport, who will be followed by Johanna Klemenko.
Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport, the Executive Director of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. And just by chance, we have the same message. But first, I'd like to thank you, the board, and the MTA staff for what appears to be a wise and fair decision to keep the base fare and the accessoride fare at $2.75. No one wants a fare hike. But as many of us have testified repeatedly, if you're going to raise the fare, at least do it fairly. We appreciate that you've listened to us as we've urged you to keep the base fare at $2.75, and I know accessoride riders and others who have a tough time scraping together the cash to ride the subways and buses will appreciate it as well when and if you take your vote on the fare hike on Wednesday. And I hope you look at other ideas to give riders on accessoride and other riders discounts as you eliminate the bonus. On subway access and elevators, we're here with a different message. Governor Cuomo and the MTA must settle our civil rights lawsuits on subway accessibility and elevator maintenance. We can't wait. We can't wait for vague promises from the governor that if congestion pricing comes through, then we'll make sure stations are accessible. No, you and Governor Cuomo, who controls the MTA, after all, must do better. So far, when we attempted to negotiate a settlement in our lawsuit, calling for a legally binding subway accessibility plan, our proposals were rejected out of hand. Some history is in order here. In 1979, a disability group sued the MTA over the lack of subway accessibility. Over the objections of the MTA staff and even Mayor Koch, Governor Cuomo, Governor Mario Cuomo, agreed to make 100 key stations accessible. Governor Cuomo, Governor Andrew Cuomo, should do the same thing here for the rest of the system. I just want to say one last thing. We know there's a difference this time. To his credit, President Byford has made accessibility one of the 4 pillars.
Please summarize your remarks, Mr. Rappaport.
I shall. Of his Fast Forward program, including 50 accessible stations to the next capital program, and many board members have been on board on that as well. Now, Governor Cuomo and the MTA, settle with us so you can keep that promise. Thank you.
The next speaker is Johanna Klemenko, who will be followed by Christine Coleman.
How do you do? Good morning, members of the board and my fellow advocates. I'm here representing Sydney, and I'm also representing myself as a public citizen who is entirely dependent on the e-Hail on-demand program to lead my extremely busy life as a professional. I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a dance movement therapist, I'm a social worker with a specialty working with people with disabilities, and I'm a professor. In order for me to do, and I spend half of my life in rehab, in physical therapy, in order to be able to function, to continue doing all the things that I'm doing. The only thing that makes that possible is my access to e-Hail and on-demand transportation. I am horrified to hear that there is a possibility of putting a cap on the e-Hail program, and I am enraged that the e-Hail program has not been extended to the people who are horribly, horribly mistreated by being forced to wait outside in the cold, in the rain, in the snow for hours for regular accessoride vehicles that do not arrive. I mean, it's very clear from all of the publicity that the MTA receives in the media that there's been a lack of transparency about where billions of dollars have been spent rebuilding the subway system, expanding the subway system. To say that our little program is costing too much money is really horrifying, and we really need to have some figures that show.
Please summarize your remarks.
We need to know how much money is being spent on the e-hail program. The e-hail program and the on-demand program need to be expanded to everybody in Accessoride.
Thank you. The next speaker is Christine Coleman, who will be followed by Richard Faust.
Hi, I live in Queens, and I rely on the subway to get around the city, and I'm having a baby in April. So I'm really frustrated about the elevator situation, the lack of accessibility, and how I'm going to navigate the subway with a stroller with all my bags and belongings. I see parents struggle with this all the time, trying to get up and down stairs. And it's just unacceptable that we don't have a working elevator in every station for parents with kids, for the disabled, for everyone that needs one. Thank you. I saw the recent story about the death of Malaysia Goodson, who's just trying to get through the subway with her kids safely with a stroller, and it's horrible, and it could have been avoided if there had been an elevator available to her. Moms, dads, parents, everyone needs a way to navigate the subway safely with babies and small children. I don't want to have a fear of using the subway all the time when I'm just trying to get around the city with my baby. Safety and accessibility need to be top priorities for the MTA, and we need elevators now. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Richard Faust, who will be followed by Colin Wright.
I'm Richard Faust. I'm a 41-year veteran of the subway system. I would not live in a city or anywhere that did not have a subway system. I've raised 2 kids. My wife and I have both been up and down stairs with strollers as well. I run a small business. I do need to use elevators to take my books up and down to the subways. We need elevators now. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Faust. The next speaker is Colin Wright.
Good morning. Colin Wright with Transit Center. Yesterday's reporting that you're wavering on accessible stations, if true, is part of a gross and long-standing pattern of behavior on behalf of MTA leadership. That is, in a competition for limited funding, this agency always cuts accessibility first, as if it's optional. Accessibility is not optional. It's absolutely essential. $30 billion is more than enough money to make 50 stations accessible. In fact, it's not about money. It's about your priorities. We demand this agency dedicate an appropriate percentage of the upcoming capital budget to allow transit to make at least 50 stations newly accessible, regardless of whether funding comes in at $40 billion or $30 billion or any other number. Not doing so is a moral failure on your part. Re-enter settlement talks and agree to a binding legal commitment to make all stations accessible. You claim you're not bound by city human rights laws, and yet you flout the human rights of hundreds of thousands of people every day. People with disabilities contend with the least accessible subway in the entire country. Malaysia Goodson died 3 weeks ago. 30 years after the ADA, access for hundreds of thousands of people must be your first priority, rather than a bargaining chip left off the table in a negotiation. And a message to Governor Cuomo, Speaker Hastie, and Leader Stewart Cousins, if they're listening. Give the MTA every penny it needs to fix our crumbling transit system that happens to support the economies of this city and state, period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Chairman, that was the last public speaker.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your coming and sharing with the committee. Minutes of our January meeting are in the committee book. May I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Are there any changes or comments on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. Are there any changes to the work plan?
Chairman, there are no changes to the work plan.
Thank you, Ms. Patel. Now I'm glad to ask President Andy Byford to make his opening statement and to clarify a few things that we have heard in the past few minutes.
Okay, good morning everyone, and I'd just like to echo the chairman. Thanks again to all the speakers who came today. So I will open with just a quick reaction to the many speakers who raised concerns about accessibility, and I understand that. There's a reason, I brought it with me as ever, the fast forward plan. There's a reason why fully 1/4 of fast forward is dedicated to accessibility. And on page 39, there is a crystal clear commitment, and I'm going to read it out. Accessible stations, 50 plus new accessible stations within 5 years. So all subway riders are no more than 2 stops from an accessible station. So Mr. Chairman, and for the benefit of anyone out there who, and I'll use your words, thinks that we're wavering, well, this president isn't wavering. My commitment to that 50 stations is rock solid. And we fully intend to still do 50 stations within the capital plan. The concerns that you have are generated by this debate that is somewhat premature. We haven't yet got the budget. But even when we get the budget, my commitment to those 50 stations remains, again, rock solid, 50 stations. Thank you. Okay, so I'll now move to my other items. So. Lots going on, as ever, in transit land, at a time when there are huge pressures on this organisation and many competing draws on our time. It is, I believe, essential that we maintain all-out focus on job number 1, namely provision of safe, punctual, reliable transit service. And in our quest for that continuous improvement, it's very pleasing to report further substantial progress across the board, which a number of us, including President Pat Foy and my boss, Ronnie Hakim, announced yesterday at an event at Fulton Street. And that related specifically to what you'll hear from Sally Librera, the SVP for Subways, namely that subway performance shows further improvement across all indicators, which I believe is testament to the hard work and attention to operational detail of Sally and her team. As Sally will report, January marks the 5th month in a row that we have met the delay reduction target that I set last July. And as a point of detail, and again Sally will comment upon this, I am pleased to see, among many other good indicators, I am pleased to see the uplift in punctuality on the 7 line, now that CBTC, Communications-Based Train Control, is operational end-to-end. And bear in mind that it's end-to-end before we've even switched on automatic train operation, which we will begin to do from next month. Customers are noticing these improvements, and our Chief Customer Officer Sarah will report on a marked reduction in subway complaints. And this work reflects the positive impact of the Subway Action Plan, but also our initiative to focus all out on operational discipline, in other words, on getting the basics right every day. On buses and paratrans, we continue to make steady progress as a result of our route-by-route analysis that highlights delay hotspots to be addressed. As Alex Elagudin will report, I recently booked and took an Accessoride trip to see for myself, just a snapshot, to see for myself how the service performs. The update reports on a most informative, highly positive accessibility forum that we held in this room earlier this month, in a first for the MTA. And on buses, I was very pleased to see the Mayor launch the city's plan to improve bus lanes along with Commissioner Trottenberg. This gives us a golden opportunity to now accelerate bus improvements. We're all on the same page. Turning to capital, our capital team achieved a milestone with the successful completion of the last of the Enhanced Station Initiative projects, with one stair project finished this week. Many lessons were learned along the way, but there is no doubt that the program delivered greatly enhanced station facilities for our customers, received to widespread acclaim. In addition to many other initiatives, and again as we heard from advocates today, a huge effort has been put into creating a modified alternative service plan for the revised L-Line project. With around 70 days to go before the start of the tunnel work, we have begun to share the emerging plans with stakeholders and communities to enable smooth implementation. I am happy to report that those ESI stations are now open to the public. The new stations have been extremely well received by customers, and the contracting community was very receptive to the get in, get done, get out approach. In this month's procurement package, there are 6 change orders for work on the Astoria line, which you'll hear from Steve Plachocki on. And we are negotiating another number of change orders for the ESI program, of which up to 8 are likely to come to the board. So I'm very grateful to my team that we continue to deliver such work in the midst of such demanding and complex times. Lots happening, but it's all about continuous improvement, and I'd welcome your questions.
Mr. Weisbrod and then Mr. Albert.
First of all, I want to congratulate you and your staff and Sally and everyone for the noticeable improvement in performance, and also I have to say, give a shout out to Joe Loda, who was the chair at the time, who developed the subway action plan, and I think many of the results that we're seeing now is a product of that. So I want to congratulate you, but also congratulate him for the plan that he came up with. As you know, I do have a question about the data that we get. As you know, Controller Stringer issued a report on the reliability and transparency of the MTA subway performance reporting, and the misleading data that the board received over many years, and to your credit, Mr. Byford, that has improved substantially over the last, since you've arrived, and that transparency, as noted by the controller, has changed for the better significantly. But beyond that, the controller did have a number of recommendations going forward, and I would just ask whether you embrace those recommendations, or carrying out those recommendations, or have issues with any of the recommendations that the controller made.
So thank you, and I'll just I echo your comments about the Subway Action Plan and Chairman Lotus. Certainly the SAP, in conjunction with the Safe Seconds program and the work we're doing with the speed unit, are the driving forces behind this renaissance, which needs to go way further. In general, we're still ploughing through the Comptroller's report. We need to provide a formal response to that. I thought it was insightful. We need to provide a response, which we'll do via the board and this committee to that report, and we will be responding to each of the recommendations. However, there is one that I've just asked Sally to comment on, which came up yesterday, actually, which was the recommendation and the observation made around whether or not we include planned events, and some confusion, I think, around which planned activity does get included in the on-time punctuality statistics and which do not. So I'll ask Sally, please, to comment on that.
The weekday major incidents indicator that's included in the report is intended to capture unplanned incidents, as is described in the report on the summary page. Those are unplanned incidents that could be caused by our equipment. Those are unplanned incidents that could be caused by external factors. But planned work delays are not included in the major incident indicator. In all other indicators, planned work delays are included. So when we talk about the quantum of delays over the course of the month, planned work delays are included. When we talk about on-time performance, that takes in and factors in planned work delays. Each of our indicators is representing a different aspect of our service. And as we've talked about before, no one indicator does the best job of describing overall customer service, but together we have pulled these statistics together because we think comprehensively they best represent what the customer experiences, they best represent the service that we're running, and they best represent the different types of impacts that manifest in different ways in our service.
Can I just ask a little? I've said here many times I've always been a little skeptical of the value of the 50 or more trains delayed, because it doesn't take into account how long they're delayed or how many trains were delayed or when they were delayed or the like. But why are we inconsistent in terms of not including planned delays that affect 50 or more trains and including planned delays that affect 50 or fewer than 50 delays, trains?
Maybe I'll kick off and Sally can add to this. What I said yesterday at Fulton Street, I'll just reiterate here, and some of you may have heard me say this, so forgive me. I think what you're trying to do in all cases, absolute transparency, and I'm glad you've noticed an improvement in that regard, because there's nothing to hide here. We're about continuous improvement. We want to have meaningful metrics, and we want to have meaningful statistics that reflect the customer's reality, and that provide data for us to then act upon. We should be data-driven in everything that we do, and we try to do that. But what I said at Fulton Street yesterday was, I think there is a danger if we were to have if we were to include the impact of planned work, in other words, improvement activity, within the metric which relates to unplanned 50 train impactful events. I think there's a danger that you end up with a perverse incentive, namely that in the quest to show improvement and to show increased punctuality, we might be tempted to shelve doing really necessary work. In other words, to put off doing work because we know that will accumulate delays by its very nature. You will definitely, on a big job, soon rack up yet another 50 train incident to add to the total. So I want to avoid that. I always want to avoid perverse incentives. At the end of the day, it's really important to get the work done such that although there's pain in the short term, in the long term, customers gain because you've bitten the bullet and you've done what needs to be done. But the reason that those planned items are included in the other metrics is because you can see them indicated very transparently in other ways. That's the reason. Anything to add to that, Sally?
And just one final question on this, Mr. Chair, if I may. And again, I do want to underscore the vast improvement in transparency that you've implemented, and it's really so significantly better. We still have a goodly number of delays that are a quarter, roughly, that are attributable to operating environment, which is sort of a catch-all category, the way overcrowding used to be a catch-all category. And as former Mayor Bloomberg always used to say, you can't fix what you can't measure. And how much progress are you making in terms of reducing that catch-all category, or are we reaching a point where operating environment is simply
Actually,
there?
One of the things I planned to mention this morning in my remarks is that we've made significant progress with respect to the number and the share of the total delays that are attributed to operating environment. So this month, we're reporting on January statistics, and in January on weekdays, I think it was 28.7% of the delays were operating environment delays. When we first started talking about this category in the spring of 18, we were talking about a 40% figure. So we've been able to bring that down month over month through a lot of analysis now that we've merged our terminal delay database data into our centralized incident reporting database. And we've been able to run analytics, and we've been able to pick up some of the delays that formerly we weren't attributing to a parent incident that might have been happening to other lines that are on a corridor but weren't necessarily on the same line that had the initial incident. We've been able to more correctly assign those delays to their appropriate parent incident. But I think there is a tie here to the major incidents comment that you made earlier. Certainly, the major incidents indicator is not a perfect indicator. As we've talked about before, the number of major incidents often depends on where and when incidents happen. But nonetheless, we have kept the major incidents indicator in the book and in the public reporting because at this point, we think it's the best proxy that we have for the number of incidents that are unplanned that significantly impact a significant number of customers. That's what the rationale is for the 50+ trains, although that's an arbitrary number. But in terms of having some metric that shows that relative impact, because none of the other indicators explicitly do that, that's the value that we see in that indicator in the mix. That said, as we get better at identifying those operating environment delays to their parent incident, we will, all else equal, be pushing more delays onto some of our incidents, and we could be impacting that major incident indicator, the data that's associated with that. So all of these data points are connected. Like I said before, none of them are perfect. This is all a work in progress, but we do think collectively they certainly are showing improved performance, but also collectively they're painting a more comprehensive picture about the different things that are happening in the system.
Thank you very much.
First, let me add to Carl's congratulations on the performance. I think it is actually being felt. I've heard a number of people tell me they think they're waiting less time and their train trip is taking a shorter period of time. So that's a wonderful thing. We hope it can continue. Andy, on your report, you made reference to the 7 line and the CBTC. We're not actually receiving the full benefit of that yet, as the 2 to 3 additional trains per hour has not begun yet, correct?
That's correct, Commissioner. That's correct. So let me just expand upon that. It was good, actually, to have, I was very pleased to receive a note from your former colleague, former Commissioner Ira Greenberg, just over the weekend, where he said, and I flicked it to the team because it's their work, not mine, what a great experience he's had, much improved experience on the 7 line, albeit we still want to do more, but he said he's noticed a clear difference. Why is that? Because we're beginning to feel the benefit of CBTC, which it's a proven system. It is a mature system. There's a reason why it's being installed in Hong Kong, retrofitted actually in Hong Kong a couple of years ago to use the most up-to-date version. In London, in Singapore, in Paris, in real quality systems. So you've not yet felt the real benefit because, as you alluded to, we haven't yet turned on ATO. My new signaling vice president, Pete Tomlin, who I'm not sure if he's here today, but Pete, I've asked him to look at speeding up the turning on of ATO. In fact, to be fair, he suggested it. He wants to bring that forward, probably 3 trains to begin with, and we'll start to see much better spacing of the trains when they're operated in ATO. We intend to start that from next month, and I see no reason why the 7 line, should not achieve such regular high 90+% OTP as the L line currently does, which also benefits from CBTC.
Yes, and you just raised an issue that propels me to ask. We've done it on the L and on the 7 because those are discrete lines, so to speak. Is it much more complicated to do it on lines that share tracks with each other?
It is, because you, for starters, have to look at the merge points. You've got to get much more complicated interlockings right. You've also got the need to make sure that any any unit, any train that operates over that interlined section is equipped. You can't have equipped and non-equipped trains, CBTC trains, on the same line. They've either got to all be equipped or not all equipped, and there's reasons for that. I still remain, slight segue, but I'm very confident that we can, in tandem, that's why we're doing this in tandem, we can make ultra-wideband work as, if not a standalone signaling system, as a complement, if you like, an addition, an enhancement to CBTC. I'm very confident that that's going to work out. And we are about to start a trial to that effect, which means we will be able to install signaling more quickly, less intrusively, and more cheaply, so that's good. But in the meantime, let's not hang around. Let's push on with CBTC, and that's exactly what we're doing. We've just let the Culver line. We're on the QBL at the moment, the Queens Boulevard line, and we're about to go with the 8 line. And final point is with Pete now coming on board to join our excellent team that was already here, we will be doing it in a much more efficient, much more expedited manner to embrace the lessons we've learned on the first 2 lines.
Mr. Byford, as you know, I have in the past been somewhat skeptical of the data that has been presented. But there is one truth which emerges, and that is, looks like you've probably hit rock bottom and are climbing up very successfully based on the January statistics, and I congratulate you and your colleagues for that. I'd like to ask you 2 questions, if I may, both unrelated. The first is there a valid metric in the lead time between trains? In other words, if the trains are 3 minutes apart, there's greater likelihood that you'll get faster service than if it's 4 minutes apart. Is that a valid metric that we can look at here, or is it premature because of CBTC?
Well, no. I mean, I've often said in this meeting, I've said, Sally may wish to add to this, to me, the most important metric for a subway, which should be, tick-tock service, very, very regular service, unlike my colleagues on the railroad, where you target a particular train because timetable is particularly important. Say you're on 15, 20-minute headways, you've got to get there for that specific time, because if you don't, you'll miss the train. You'll have to wait for the next one. What's really important on a subway, where it should be relentless service, evenly spaced, is the customer journey time metric and the wait time metrics that you already see in the book. And I know you have some questions on them, and we'd like to resolve them today after this meeting. So you've got to get your headways right, in other words, the gaps between the train. The linkage to CBTC and ultimately to ATO is, with ATO, you take away the uncertainties of human interaction, because every operator drives differently. You have confident operators, less confident operators. An ATO system, albeit still with an operator, one of our valued operators at the front to intervene if necessary. The system spaces the trains and automatically regulates the trains, and that has huge benefit, and you already see that with the punctuality figures that we get on the L. Anything to add, Sally? No.
The second, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take a moment to echo something that has been said by the people in the audience. For the first time today, it registered with me that the issue of elevators is not just for the disabled, but for the elderly, and, as previously pointed out, for the people with the strollers. And it is very clear to me now, if it wasn't before, that we need to provide a clear priority for elevators throughout the system. This is an older population than it was last year, and it'll be still older next year, hopefully. And my point in all of this is we really do have to provide a priority for it. I know that's a point you have made from day one, and I'd like to endorse that as well.
Mr. Merdler, my own knees second that emotion. let me, I know President Byford has already addressed this amply. With your permission, I'll ask Ms. Librera to address the subway report.
Good morning. I am pleased to report that Subway's performance reached new highs in January. In last month's meeting, I reported on December statistics and talked about a couple of those statistics being the best that we had seen in 4 years. Today, reporting on January can say that January outperformed December. Weekday and weekend delays were both the lowest in 4 years. We met the 10,000 delay reduction target, as Andy said, for the 5th consecutive month. On-time performance was the highest in 4 years, and nearly every line improved in on-time performance when we look at January of 19 compared to January of 18. Weekday on-time performance was 76.7% compared with 58% 1 year ago. That is an increase of nearly 19 straight percentage points. January was also 8 percentage points higher than the 12-month average for weekday on-time performance. Our customer focus metrics all were significantly improved compared to last year in January. Additional train time was 45% better in January this year versus January of last year. And it was below 1 minute for the first time since we introduced the metric. This is of particular note because this metric does a very good job of reinforcing the benefit of the basics approach that we are deploying, where we are focusing on safely speeding travel for customer journeys in the system. Additional train time, additional platform time, and customer journey time performance each improved across every single line in January of 19 compared to January of 18. We had 52 weekday major incidents in January, which continues our recent trend of improved performance in this indicator. This is 17% better than our 12-month indicator, or 12-month average, and 50% better than the number in January of 18, which was a particularly challenging month for major incidents. Together, these results show the continued progress that we are making through the Subway Action Plan, and also through our Save Seconds program, which includes focusing on the basics and improving the precision of the service that we're running, with precise dispatching and proactive service management. As Andy mentioned, I'd also like to highlight the improvement on the 7 line, which reached 87.6% in weekday on-time performance in January, compared to 63.7% just 1 year ago, now that we have CBTC on the entire line. The 2 CBTC lines, the L line and the 7 line, had the highest on-time performance in January of the entire system, except for the shuttles. Another improvement, as I mentioned earlier, in this month's report is a significant reduction in the share of the weekday delays that are attributed to operating environment. In January, 28.7% of weekday delays were attributed to operating environment, down from the 40% level that when we first introduced this category in the spring of 18. This represents an overall reduction in the number of delays, as well as improved categorization of delays with regard to root cause. In conclusion, on behalf of the Subways organization, I want to stress that we know that we have more to do, but we are pleased with the progress that we're making, and I am very thankful to the Subways team for their tremendous efforts to be delivering improved service each and every day. And I'd also like to thank the frontline staff who worked around the clock in frigid temperatures last month to keep the system safe and moving. Thank you.
Since we discussed much of what you just got through presenting, I'm going to ask if there's anything new, Mr. Albert.
Thanks, Sally. Just wondering, how much does the introduction of new rolling stock play in the better performance statistics that we're experiencing? Like, we have more R179s in service now than we did before. We've been able to take away some of the old R32s and 42s. Has this had any impact?
At this point, no, that's not a specific driver or a significant driver of the increases that we're seeing, particularly because when you look at the increases, you're seeing the increases across every single line. So what we're seeing is a lot of the efforts are coming together for improved subway service.
Thanks.
There's nothing further. We'll go on to the next part of our agenda. Thank you very much, and ask Mr. Lieber to give us an update.
At the risk of being anticlimactic after that extraordinary piece of news, I'm overdue to give the board and the committee an update about the status of the digital signage program. This is an installation that we've had in process for over a year now, and I very quickly want to update you on where it stands. Back in September of 17, the board approved a 10-year arrangement with Outfront Media for the installation of a comprehensive digital signage program throughout the system, both in the stations and in the cars and on the railroads as well as on transit. So the purpose is the ambitious goal of transforming customer communications and also having a self-funded program that provides substantial support to the operating budget, well in excess of $100 million a year. This is the largest out-of-home digital media program in the world. And these screens are going to provide, as I said, advertising, customer information, but also hopefully enlivening the transit environment. And it's important to know that Outfront, the private partner we selected after that long process, they're responsible for the installation, operation, maintenance, and financing of all the screens. Initial MTA revenue share is 55% of baseline or the minimum annual guarantee. We have obviously been generating revenue from advertising for years, but this is the opportunity to be in the 21st century and to provide the kind of advertising opportunity that media professionals want. While the CapEx is still being expended, we have the benefit of a minimum annual guarantee. It was $115 million last year. Next year, it'll be $117 million. And once the CapEx is paid off, the 55% share jumps to 60% of baseline and then 70% of incremental revenue. In the first few months, we've been working closely with transit in particular. Sarah has been a great partner. We were planning, mobilizing, doing the screen design. The first pilots began going live in July. And as I said, the effort includes many different parts of the transit organization and as well as Metro-North and Long Island Railroad. It's a pilot station with Metropolitan Canarsie on the L line, Metropolitan Larimer on the Canarsie line. Most stations have 2 customer information screens at the entrances. You probably have seen those. On normal days, riders are going to see up-to-date maps, service status, transit messaging, and train time, standardized and, most important, real-time data. And for the first time, we're going to be able to dynamically switch to the night version of the subway map and to highlight unupdated planned service changes in time. And we're still working on this. We're going to be able to target more specific information to every station, and that it's a bit of a software project, but is very much the focus of the team's effort right now. Digital also gives us the opportunity to try new formats, and so together with Transit, Sarah's team, we're developing a real-time service information concept, several of them, which we're going to begin to pilot next month. That's one of them you see on the screen. And as I noted again, this is a self-funded project. You're going to definitely see more advertising screens in the system than communication screens. Advertising is obviously what generates the revenue to pay for all of this, but we do have 20% of those advertising screens that are available to us for our customer and public service communications. So that is an important benefit even of the advertising screens as well as our transit information owned screens. On the rolling stock, this is, in terms of numbers, of the 53,000 total screens, 37,000 of them are going to be in the subway cars and in on railroad cars as well. Testing's underway on the 7 line. The duration of exposure to an advertising image or a communication item is a key advertising metric. So we have
You know, we have in effect lots and lots of New Yorkers whose eyeballs we can sell to advertisers, and that is going to increase our value over time. I think we're hitting our stride. Screens are proliferating. We've got more than 1,200 installed already, 4 out of 5 boroughs, and 50-plus subway stations. We hit the goal for 2018, and we're, I think, kicking it into a different accelerated pace. We've got screens deployed in 15 Long Island Railroad stations, and in Metro North, we're already in White Plains and a couple other stations. So it is starting to pick up pace very, very well. I'm happy about this program because I think the board set a goal, a twofold goal, which is that we would be able to make a lot of money for the system, which is obviously the first priority, but also to create a sense of a 21st century rider experience, both in the station and in the car. And I'm very satisfied that we're well on the way. And it's also becoming a model, I am pleased to say, of collaboration. You know, one of the things that I prioritize is collaborating with Andy and the whole transit team. This is a model of that. One other model of that is that I want to mention is that in the last couple of days we had final acceptance by transit of the entire number 7 line project, which completed its physical work with the opening of the new entrance Labor Day. But in a 4-month process to complete all of the final acceptance and to figure out whether it was technical acceptance or testing or as-built and all that process is a lot faster than some of the other major projects that transit and other organizations have done over time. So I think we're starting to hit our stride on doing many things collaboratively and effectively, and I just wanted to note that.
Chano, quick question,
Yes.
if I may. Put yourself in the position you're on a platform in the subway with a wall in front of you. Have you given thought to trying to put any of those screens on the wall? Because there you have people standing still rather than walking across the platform or the like.
You know, it's a discussion that I think is taken place, and I'm going to look at Frederica Krenke and Lucy Zachman to tell me how do I respond to that.
I can jump in. Okay. So yes, it is something that we've considered, and I would say it's not something we've ruled out. But one of the things that we are being particularly mindful of is the impacts to service for rolling out this equipment. So to put it on the track wall side would be far more invasive from a service disruption standpoint than to put it on the platform where the customers are standing. So I know initially we were targeting conduit runs and screen placement in areas that would be less disruptive for customers.
My point is, though, that there you have people standing still waiting. You've got a fixed audience. If you have no objection, I'd like to participate in that discussion and ask you a question, Mr. Byford. If I remember correctly, the Underground has those adverts as you go down the escalator and up the escalator for the same reason. Can we take a look at that as well?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that technology, Commissioner. We'll take that offline, but I know what you're talking about with the ads as they move as you go down the escalators, yes.
Okay, one other quick... Yeah. Okay. All right, one other, I think, positive news item. I wanted to share with the board a very short video we did. Every time we do a major capital project and we go out and talk to people about it, the questions are, you know, obviously, how's it going to affect the community? What are the construction impacts going to be? What are the benefits to the community? And then they ask about jobs. They ask, how can people in our community benefit from all this construction activity? And I have prioritized explaining, making sure that people understood that most of our hiring comes through the union contractors, and the key is to get people into the apprenticeship programs so that they can benefit for all this construction. And to that end, we held a public event in East Harlem, which I did a very short video about that I wanted to share with you now.
One of the things that we've heard over and over again was that East Harlemites were looking for jobs.
So we partnered with the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York to offer job information and apprenticeship program information to East Harlem residents.
We came to the MTA job fair today to promote our apprenticeship programs. We think it's good to get back into the communities and outreach to people that might be interested in a career in carpentry.
You can speak directly to all the different unions and see what they have and how well they'll fit into what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Whenever you use those three initials, MTA, it gets everyone's attention. Events like this in the community establishes that you're really concerned about investing in the people in the East Harlem community.
This is an important event to make sure that we connect the opportunities that come with a capital construction project with actual people from the community who want to work.
I just want to be someone who works hard, works for what he wants in life.
I want to thank the MTA for providing job opportunities for young people and others that want to work in a transportation project across the city of New York. Thank you, MTA.
And we're going to be trying to do those with a lot of our projects so people can participate. Thank you.
Very much. It's terrific work. Now, are we ready for the bus report? Mr. Irick, brand new grandfather, congratulations.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Our fast forward plan and continued focus on bus performance and the basics resulted in improvements in our operations across the board in January, including a 30% improvement in mechanical reliability, otherwise known as MDBF, for the month compared to January last year. Customer journey time, our new metric measuring the percentage of customers who complete their journey within 5 minutes of the schedule, improved by 3.3% in January as compared to the same month last year. This month marks the 6-month marker of the Staten Island Express network redesign, the first in a series of planned network redesigns throughout the 5 boroughs. Intended first and foremost to improve service for the Staten Island community, the redesign was informed and improved by customer feedback. I'm pleased to report today that our efforts in close partnership with the Staten Island Borough President, James Otto, the Department of Transportation and New York City Police Department, and the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 726, have resulted in some tangible and sustained improvements for the Staten Island Express bus commuters. Right now, I'll ask Craig Cipriano to highlight some of those improvements in a small presentation.
Good morning. Sorry. Okay. Good morning. As Darrell mentioned, the Staten Island Express bus redesign has incorporated an unprecedented amount of feedback. At the very outset, we knew this would be an iterative process, and our team has remained committed to getting the service right for all our customers. This chart shows that since the launch of the new Express network on August 19th, we have been making service adjustments all along the way. While we originally said we would wait 6 months to allow the network to normalize to changing customer travel patterns, we felt it was necessary to institute a new schedule and conduct a new pick in October, approximately 6 weeks after the launch. Since August, we've added 3 new routes, added back 24 bus stops, and the new SIM network has an additional 120 new weekday trips from the old X network. Our goal here was to get the network redesign right so that the customers had improved service. And as this chart shows, since the launch, we have had a sustained improvement of bus speeds by as much as 12% from the old X network. In fact, Staten Island Express average bus speeds now approach 18 miles per hour as compared to the system-wide average of 14 miles per hour. One particular area of focus is right outside this window, the traffic conditions entering the UL Cary Tunnel, specifically in the PM. Our collaborative efforts with New York City Department of Transportation and NYPD to keep traffic moving near the approach have improved bus speeds by 30%. Average SIM speeds in that area are now over 16 miles per hour as compared to 12 miles per hour when we first began. These efforts have included redeployed traffic enforcement agents to Battery Place and West Street and consolidated bus stops on Battery Place. We are also working with New York City DOT to implement a queue jump and/or a bus lane in the very near future. So how do these speeds translate to reduced travel times for our customers? Through early January, our data shows shorter travel times for Staten Island Express Bus customers both to and from Manhattan. As this chart shows, AM trips to Manhattan are 5.4 minutes shorter, an 8% improvement from the X network. PM trips are 4.3 minutes shorter, a 7% improvement. We are hopeful these numbers will be even better with the implementation of our recent January pick. So to take a look at that, we took a look at trips from Eltingville Transit Center, where approximately 40% of the SIM trips run through. Running times from Eltingville inbound to Manhattan showed an improvement of 4.4 miles per hour and 3.4 miles per hour to downtown. In the PM, trips coming back to Eltingville, we see an improvement of 7 miles per hour. Unfortunately, we show a slight decrease on the outbound trip back to Eltingville, but given all our hard work and improvement around the tunnel, we have to take a closer look and feel there might be some other issues around the expressway that we're digging into. So while we have discussed bus speeds and travel times, let's take a look at reliability and performance against schedule. Our metrics show that the new Staten Island Express Bus network has proven to be more reliable, with more customers getting to their destinations within 5 minutes of the schedule, a metric we call customer journey time. When we compare January and February of 2018 to 2019, you can see from the chart that 71% of SIM customers do arrive within 5 minutes of schedule, as compared to 62% of the previous Express Bus customers. This is also a big improvement on the system-wide average of 63%. Additionally, the service adjustments we have made along the way have clearly impacted performance, as shown in the difference between the fourth quarter and the January pick. Next, additional bus stop time. Measuring the additional time a customer waits at the bus stop compared to the schedule, we are also showing market improvement. As you can see from the chart, the additional bus stop time of 1 minute 8 seconds versus the old network of the same period was 1 minute and 32 seconds. The new network is also significantly better than the system-wide average of 1 minute 35. Again, with each service adjustment, we have seen a market improvement in performance. And lastly, weight assessment, which measures how evenly our buses are spaced, shows that 88%, or roughly 9 out of every 10 buses, arrive no more than 3 minutes over the scheduled interval in the peak and 5 minutes in the off-peak. This is a significant improvement over the weight assessment of 84% for the old Express network and the current system-wide average of 85% for all Express buses. One consistent comment we hear from all our customers is the importance of their ability to get a seat when the bus arrives. The chart on the left shows the average number of weekday trips with standees, and as you can see early on, the old X network, shown here in blue, did a better job at accommodating customers in seats. However, as travel patterns shifted, and as we have made adjustments to the SIM network, shown in gold, this has changed. While ridership has remained roughly the same between the two networks, more customers are getting seats on their commutes now as compared to the previous Express network. In January of 2019, the average number of weekday SIM trips with standing customers was 34, compared to 42 in January of 2018. Additionally, shown on the right, with each service adjustment since the launch of the new network, we have decreased the average number of standing weekday customers on SIM buses from a high of 60 in August to 33 in January of 2019. It is important to understand that these 33 trips are out of a roughly 1,200 trips we do every weekday. So next, what are our customers telling us? This slide shows the trend in complaints coming into the MTA directly related to the Staten Island Express service. And as you can see by the gold line, we had complaints spiked at the onset of the redesign and have since normalized. This normalization is the result of customers adjusting to the new network and our unprecedented responsiveness to customer feedback. As the slide shows, SIM-related complaints have diminished drastically. Our top 4 complaint categories have decreased considerably, and the current nature of complaints has shifted from network design to the operational challenges that we manage on a day-to-day basis. Looking towards the future, SIM customers can expect the launch of real-time seat availability information online and via the My MTA app. This function will show the customer load on SIM buses in real time so that customers can make a decision whether they would like to sit or prefer to stand or want to wait for the next arriving bus that might have more seat availability. When this function is available, we will be reaching out to customers to make sure they are aware. And lastly, as we look ahead, we continue to work closely with Borough President Otto, our customers, and all our stakeholders. The next Staten Island Express Bus Network service adjustment is scheduled for April 28th, and we are currently gathering feedback and analyzing data on several routes to see where we need to further adjust schedules to meet customer demand and reflect real-time operating conditions. Thank you.
And then Mr. Merdler.
So this is for you, Craig, or Darrell. How much of the improved statistics that were just presented are as a result of the buses not traversing the island of Manhattan and going from downtown to midtown versus the doing away with some stops on Staten Island?
So I don't have an exact percentage, but for sure, as you referenced, we've eliminated some bus stops. We have new network design where, as you alluded to, buses don't travel from downtown all the way through the city streets to Manhattan. And as well as we are seeing better travel time specifically on our Jersey routes. That's also another main indicator driver.
So the routes that use the Jersey Turnpike and the tunnel are more reliable than those that use the Verrazano and the Gowanus, I'm assuming.
It's where we've seen the most improvement in terms of speed. Okay.
And the complaints that were received were largely from the doing away with certain stops on Staten Island?
It was certainly stops were a big driver of complaints. That seemed to really, get to people. But again, when we started this process, one of the things that we heard overwhelmingly was that the express network was not really express, and that there really was a lot of stops. And so as we look at network redesign throughout the whole city, that is an element that we have to evaluate and look at. So,
thank you.
Mr. Bertler.
Darrell, you've heard in prior meetings the issue of fare evasion, and on the buses, it's about $119 million last year. What, if anything, first question, what, if anything, has been done since this issue came fully before the board in order to minimize fare evasion on the buses? And number two, to what extent, if any, have you been able to enlist the services of the New York City Police Department, both in terms of fare evasion and cleaning parkers out of bus stops?
So a lot has been done, I'm proud to say. So with Inside Transit, Vice President of Security, Bobby Deal, along with his Eagle team, with the support of Andy Byford, expanding that and coming up with a new strategy to focus on fare evasion, we're starting to see maybe not all of the outcomes that we would like to see, but there is certainly much more activity, and I have a lot of confidence in that strategy. As it relates to NYPD, over the last 6-7 months, we have, I would say that the relationship and the effectiveness of that relationship has grown significantly. We've done a number of blitzes with NYPD in bus lanes. Anywhere we see pinch points, there's a dialogue several times a week with my top staff and NYPD, particularly the area of Chief Chan and Chief Pilecki, have been exceedingly responsive, something that I haven't seen in many, many years. So I think a lot is happening. A lot has been done since we've talked about this last year, and I'm very confident that it's going to continue to improve.
Is there a possibility at some point that you can pick where we could get a more detailed report on the fare evasion aspects, both as to buses and as to subways?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can definitely do that, Commissioner, just so you know, it's me.
I'm sorry, Bobby, I was looking for you.
That's okay, I know. We're actually currently in a pilot program right now doing regular bus service with enforcement. We've got 3 teams that are assigned, 2 to the Bronx, 1 to Staten Island, and we're seeing an effect there. I've been out there a couple of times, and there's nothing like getting on a bus and having people say, yeah, thank you, because someone who's not paying their fare is being taken off. I will tell you that.
When do you think we might be able to get a report?
Bobby, I mean, we could do something preliminary in the next couple of months, but I'll defer to Bobby because he's leading that effort.
We'll definitely get you something.
Mr. Byford, if we could get that for subways, that would be helpful at some point that's convenient for you.
Yeah, and absolutely. And one thing that is still a work in progress is working with Chief De La Torre, but particularly with Topside NYPD, who, let's be really frank here, have a role to play. We really need NYPD on side. We've certainly got this chief on side. We need NYPD across the city to be helping us on this pan-city issue. Let's go for May, if that's okay. We have a huge amount on at the moment. I'm just mindful of just how many priorities there are, but we'll certainly sign up for May.
All right, thank you.
Just want to finish up with paratransit, if you don't mind.
I'm hoping you will.
Okay, all right. All right, thanks a lot, Craig, for the presentation. So on to paratransit. In 2018, we launched our paratransit and fast forward plan to provide our customers with greater flexibility, reliability, and transparency. Our performance in December reflects the significant efforts we've made, with improvements seen in almost every performance metric in December of 2018 as compared to the same period in 2017. On-time performance improved for both primary carriers, which is at 96%, and brokers at 93%, with both exceeding their goals. Primary and broker no-shows in December were also outperformed goals and were at some of the lowest levels we've ever seen. In December, we've also outperformed goals for complaints related to transportation, service quality, and average call answering speeds. In fact, December 2018 saw the lowest level of transportation-related complaints in recent times, down 43% as compared to the same period in December. Preliminary results from our 2018 Paratransit Customer Satisfaction Survey are also encouraging. The survey shows that 90% of our customers were very satisfied with their last Access-a-Ride trip, and 97% agree that Access-a-Ride is a good value for one's money. The percentage of total satisfied customers increased from 74% in 2017 to 87% in 2018. While we are encouraged by these improvements, we fully recognize that there's still much more work to be done to sustain and improve upon the level of service. To that end, in 2018, we awarded contracts for a new real-time scheduling and computer-aided dispatch system and a new AVL vehicle location monitoring system. These systems are vital to improving the effectiveness and flexibility of paratransit service to our customers. We anticipate that these upgraded systems will ensure better schedules and on-time performance, shorter trip times, and an overall improved customer experience. The rollout of the scheduling system is planned in a phased approach beginning in May of this year. We will provide updates to the board on our progress later as the year progresses. Finally, I would like to thank Mike Cosgrove and the entire paratransit team for their dedication and the work that they do each and every day. I also want to thank Commissioner Vanderpool for her support within the task force. It's been laser focused, and we're starting to see the outcomes that we expect. Thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment now that both the Department of Buses and Subways have given their reports, and to acknowledge the real hard work that all of you have done and the results that we're seeing, and of course a thank you and gratitude to Andy. It is incredibly encouraging to finally come to committee meetings and have some really great progress to report back and to discuss and to understand more fully all the elements that went into sustaining and delivering that progress. And I just hope that we in 6 months, 12 months are not looking back at this moment as an anomaly, because we're seeing all this progress at the very same time that there's tremendous capital and operating pressure on our budgets. And while there are a good deal of reports in the press, both substantiated and unsubstantiated, about elevators being cut and workforce being laid off, et cetera, what we are hearing is this pressure manifest. And if we do not get this funding that we need, we are not going to be able to continue to report this progress moving forward. So this is more a message for our state legislature, and then the public and the advocates, and of course all of us board members who continue to have conversations with those who are asking our opinions about the best way of generating revenue and what the MTA needs, et cetera. I think what we need to do, because I know many of you are frequently visiting with the legislature in Albany and with members of the city council, is to put together a very brief cheat sheet on this progress, because legislators are often saying, we're not seeing this progress, our constituents are still saying X to us, and if you put together, you know, I'm a big fan of the one-pagers, if you put together 10 bullets that say all the things that you've shared and delivered every time you're meeting with legislators, I think it goes a long way. There has to be, and I know Sarah and her team are working on this, a concerted customer strategy, an ongoing concerted customer strategy to deliver these points of progress, because we know it's going to take the public a very long time to actually feel a lot of these results, because for so many years we have not had the best experiences. So we need to amplify that, and this just goes to the good work that Sarah and her team have been doing. I love seeing every month some of the metrics in decreased customer complaints, for example. Great on paratransit, certainly great on subways, 36% fewer complaints on subways. Paratransit, 46% is significant. So we are seeing how this progress is married to some of the customer experience, and we need to continue to double down on that outreach and that education to the public, because it's only fair for all of us to still be somewhat skeptical about that progress, despite the really good work that everyone's done. Thank you.
If I may just comment on that, having asked the chair, if I may, I'll just reassure you on that point, Commissioner, and thank you for your kind words. We recognized as a team when we came together that we'd have no chance of getting the billions needed for that unless we got the existing system to work as well as it can do within the available funding. In other words, to totally and all out focus on basics across the whole suite of our activity, whether that be frontline activity or more sort of behind the scenes stuff that the likes of Steve do. So we knew that we had to get that credibility, and I think you're now seeing, I know you're now seeing the fruits of that labor. The good news is we're on the same page. 1,000 one-pagers went up to Albany yesterday, right? And they do summarize the success we've had so far across myriad indicators, and they're meant to be flags, if you like, to legislators to say, do you like what you see? If you really like what you see, there's plenty more to come. Give us the money.
I'll be brief. I just want to make one point. Over and above all of the points that have been accurately made, the legislature and Albany will look to two other facts, as the governor has pointed out. One, how we deal with cost containment, and Scott Reckler and Jan Oliba have been working actively on trying to do that. But the one piece that has not been actively worked on is how we can generate income outside the box, which we can do, but have not spent the time to do, and I would urgently recommend that you form a committee of the board to do that. There are ample opportunities, and I can walk you through half a dozen in 2 seconds.
Mr. Merdler, that committee is called the Finance Committee, which will be meeting shortly. And I believe you're a member. Mr. Elagudin, we're waiting to hear from you.
Sure, thank you so much.
A couple of updates for this month. President Byford and myself did take a secret shopper, if you will, accessoride trip with an actual customer. No one in the agency knew about that trip. President Byford got to experience the entire experience, placing the call, putting in the reservation, waiting for the call, things that I have experienced many a times. But you know, we did take a ride out to Flushing to visit one of our bus depots with the customer. It was I would say a successful trip. I mean, yes, we did get assigned a shared ride that took us through Brooklyn in order to get to Queens, but it was on time on both ends. We had great experiences with the drivers who were very courteous and safe about securing myself and the passenger who also traveled in a wheelchair. So we're happy to report on that. We certainly learned some things that we have taken back, but our trip was successful, and ultimately President Byford got a firsthand experience. Also, as many mentioned today, on the topic of elevators and future investment, as has been said, we remain committed to the Fast Forward goal. In that vein, we held a community engagement on February 6th here about asking the community what their priorities are in terms of the next stations to be made accessible. We had 100 attendees here in the boardroom, as well as over 1,000 views, more than 1,500 views on the live stream via YouTube. We've gotten a lot of feedback, all very positive, very meaningful, productive conversations on what our next priority should be, and we'll continue to do that and engage with the community on many issues, some publicly and also through our newly formed committee, which is currently open for applications. The Advisory Committee on Transit Accessibility, which is moving forward. Similarly, you may have heard that we are currently piloting a new marking for the boarding area at Fulton Street. This is one of many features that we'll be piloting throughout the year in terms of trying to increase and improve accessibility features other than elevators. We heard some people mention today about other disabilities other than those wheelchair users. We meet regularly with deaf and blind advocates, and we've actually received rave reviews from both the deaf and the blind community about the new screens on buses that read out and also textualize the next upcoming stop. So we continue to make progress, and stay tuned for many other piloting and trials of accessibility features while we test their performance and effectiveness. And I just want to give a thank you to our capital program management team, who's been a great partner in helping us deploy some of these features. We conducted trainings this month for all group station managers, as well as parts of our customer service teams on accessibility, several hour trainings that also were done in conjunction with the disability community. Every training had advocates who presented their real life experience. It was great, had a dialogue between our frontline staff and actual users with disabilities discussing the challenges they see on both sides. We'll continue this effort over the coming months, as we also will do our elevator and escalator teams, as well as others. Lastly, the Stantec study on studying all the stations continues to move forward. We've done more than 180 stations and are on pace to complete the study of all stations by the end of this year. Our internal station survey project continues to move forward. We will shortly be done with 20 stations that we've surveyed. We are surveying the existing condition of the accessibility features that are in our existing stations. Every time we complete a survey of a station, we implement the changes to fix any issues we see through various teams in the agency, and making sure that our existing stock of accessible stations is up to par and working in the best way. So with that, I conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Eligudin. I presume there are no questions on this report. Once again, thank you and your team. This is phenomenal. Now we're ready for strategy and customer experience. Ms. Meyer.
Great. And I will try and be brief since I know we are late on time. We started the year off strong and have completed several key customer communications efforts that are already directly benefiting our riders. Public address systems are now in place at 4 additional stations that previously had no broad blast announcement capability. 174th Street on the 2 and 5, 167 on the B and D, and in Queens, the Broadway station and at the 39th Avenue Dutch Hills station, which has also been recently renamed with community input. We are on track to meet our Q1 commitment to equip 400 buses, thanks to Craig and Daryl's efforts with onboard bus information screens, as Alex just alluded to. 213 buses are now in place, providing customers with next bus stop information, both visually and audibly. As you will see in this month's report, improvements in several key areas continued. Customer wait time to speak to an agent is much lower. Waits were in January of this year were 2 minutes shorter than last year. Time for calls to be answered from help points and stations improved as well. And we saw a reduction in all help point calls of 17%. Happy to say our responses to customers on social media was up 12.4% compared to January 2018, and customer satisfaction scores about the responses they received from us increased 18% compared to 2018. As we've discussed, subway complaints were down nearly 30%, with largest gains stemming from fewer complaints about employees. Those were 64% lower. Station conditions and customer information complaints were also down. Bus complaints remained stable, and complaints from accessoride customers continued to decline. Unfortunately, MetroCard complaints were up 10.5%, but we're all very excited and looking forward to the Omni rollout starting in May. I also wanted to highlight customer experience as part of the Go Forward for the L project. There are several initiatives underway that are designed to help customers plan ahead now, as well as to ensure they have the information they need to make decisions during the tunnel rehabilitation part of the project. We're working on preparing announcements, signs, and countdown clock announcement programs so customers know how to board the right train when it runs in both directions on one track. And of course, we're continuing the L Project weekly newsletters and regular website updates when there's information to share. We've scheduled 4 open houses and plan to also reach riders on platforms during the overnight and weekend times to directly reach impacted customers. I'm going to announce the 4 open houses in Brooklyn and Manhattan to ensure that that information gets to our customers. They're taking place on Thursday, March 7th at Our Lady of Guadalupe at St. Bernard on 14th Street. Wednesday, March 13th, these are all from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Williamsburg North Side School. On Tuesday, March 19th at the Grand Street Campus High School on Grand Street. And on Monday, April 8th at the 14th Street Y. We hope to see you all there. Finally, our community engagement teams were out in full force this month, attending 9 public meetings, including with the Queens Astoria Boulevard Neighborhood Association on how we're revitalizing and modernizing the entire Astoria line. Thank you. Sorry that was long.
Thank you. Your report is distinguished by not only your content, but brevity. Anybody else? No. Then we're ready for Mr. Deal and the safety report.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm going to try to be brief also. I would like to begin by pointing out 2 new line items in the monthly operations report that now identify whether a subway collision or derailment occurred on the main line or in a yard. This is in line with the new FTA and state PTSB reporting requirements that began at the start of the year. This also fulfills the requirement in the new agency safety plan that I outlined at last month's safety committee meeting. I'd like to say that as a result of months of tireless effort by the Department of Subway with a focus on the Subway Action Plan and cleaning of the right-of-way by both the vacuum train, portable vacuums, and the men and women of New York City Transit subways, fires decreased 13% when comparing February 2018 through January 2019 with the prior rolling 12-month period. Bus collisions and collision injuries continue to decrease when comparing 2018 through January 2019 with the prior 12-month period. However, bus customer accidents did show an increase. Subway customer accidents increased when comparing them between the consecutive 12-month periods, the latter of which covered calendar 2018. But it's worth noting that in the 5 out of the past 7 months, we have had a decrease. And in December alone, subway customer accidents actually decreased by approximately 17%. Employee accidents have shown a slight decrease when comparing 2018 to 2017. And New York City Transit has increased the number of its leading goal indicators as is currently making progress towards achieving these goals. Thank you. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deal. Thank you very much. Next is crime report, Chief Delatorre.
Good morning, everybody. For the first month of the year, total major felonies are down 2%, with 4 fewer incidents in January, in this January versus last year, 195 versus 199. There were 4 additional felony assaults during the month, 8 fewer robberies. Grand larcenies remained even when compared to the same period in 2018. Year-to-date, 43% or 83 of the total major felonies occurred in Manhattan, 26% or 51 in Brooklyn, 16% or 32 in the Bronx, and 15% or 29 in Queens. Felony thefts continue to make up the overwhelming majority of major felonies in our subways. In January, grand larcenies accounted for 2/3 of the total crime, 66% or 129 larcenies of the 195 total crimes. So I continue to caution riders to remain alert and secure their property, as there is a small number of individuals who have no concern for others and who prey on sleeping passengers, regardless of how many times we catch them, arrest them, and charge them with the felony theft. For example, we have 19-year-old Lord Cabina is one example. Earlier this month, our team in the Bronx arrested Cabina as he attempted to remove property from a sleeping passenger on a 4 train. Upon his arrest, he was found in possession of several additional cell phones that, upon further investigation, were stolen from other passengers along the 6th line. He was charged with several counts of grand larceny and criminal possession of stolen property. 5 days later, after his initial release, our plainclothes team in Transit District 1 in Manhattan witnessed Cabina attempt to remove a sleeping passenger's watch. He was arrested and again charged with grand larceny. It should concern all of us that at the age of 19, Cabina already has 16 prior arrests, and about half of them, by the way, are in transit. Unfortunately, he is not the only example of someone who makes a career of stealing property from subway riders. Thankfully, Cabina is in custody on $5,000 bail, awaiting his next court appearance in March. I will continue to keep you up to date on important cases and persistent offenders who are responsible for the majority of crime in transit. Finally, I would like to thank Chairman Farrar, President Byford, the board, the Department of Buses, the Long Island Railroad, for all of your assistance during the funeral of Brian Simonson. It was a very difficult time for not only the NYPD and not only Simonson's family, but I think for many of us in New York who are appalled at the loss of an officer in the line of duty. So I want to thank all of you for your support during that time and your show of sympathy. With that, I thank you again, and I welcome any questions and suggestions you may have.
You know what I'm going to ask.
Of course. So we started off with what would look like a bad beginning in January.
We're talking about hate crimes.
We're talking about hate crimes. We have 8 versus 3. They were spread out throughout the system. We have 2 in District 1, 2 in District 3, 1 in District 12, and 3 in District 32. One of the 8 was a gender crime, and we have an arrest on that. That was an assault. The other 7 were all anti-Semitic, and they were all graffiti. So let me just say this. Although we have an increase, I'm happy to say that none of this is going unnoticed. In fact, we had one incident during the month where a report came in for a SWAT sticker and was actually an anti-SWAT sticker, that somebody put a sticker in a subway, but yet it was noticed by one of our fellow transit workers and called into us. So I believe that everybody is taking it very serious, not just the NYPD, but all of our brothers and sisters who work in the transit system as well. And they are calling us in, and they're calling all of these incidents in.
Chief, if I may, I'll be brief. Chief, I have no question that the New York City Police Department is taking it very seriously, as is the MTA Police. I do have a question, however, when it gets to the prosecutor end and to the judicial end. You can arrest all you want, but until such time as the prosecutors do their job and do not regard it as the kind of crime that isn't really worth paying a lot of attention to, and judges give people a walk, you're not going to get a reaction. So let me make the suggestion to New York City Transit that I made to Metro North and Long Island Railroad. That is that your legal department be made available, or whatever portion you think appropriate, to work with the district attorneys in the 5 counties to assist them in the preparation of the cases for trial. And in the event that that does not prove sufficiently available, to do what the Corporation Counsel's Office in the City of New York has done for years. Get designated as special prosecutors and go ahead and take it seriously and prosecute it. Unless you have people who are willing and regarded as important to stop all hate crimes, and clearly the governor regards it as important, but the prosecutors seem to, in at least some boroughs, not to regard it as important. Until it is dealt with as a crime that it is, we're not going to have success. Please think about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Now for the finance reports from New York City Transit, Staten Island Rail, and MTA Bus Finance, Ms. Patel.
I'll be brief. For NYCT, the preliminary December results for average weekday ridership compared to 2017 was 3.4% lower. The year-to-date fare box revenue was $4.45 billion, or $15.7 million above the estimate. Non-reimbursable expenses were less than the estimate by 1.1%. For MTA Bus, the preliminary fare box revenue was $1.2 million above the estimate. The operating expenses were below the estimate by 4%, and ridership was 0.4% above the estimate. That concludes my report.
Any questions on that? Hearing none. Capital report, Mr. Saha.
Good morning, good afternoon actually. The majority of the planned award for the first quarter of 2019 are scheduled for February and March. But in January, we have awarded 2 small business mentoring programs totaling $4.7 million. That includes one station 4 staircase replacement. Also in January, we completed 21 projects totaling $470.4 million. That includes 2 Sandy projects. The first one is the Clark Street Tube. We completed totaling $125.6 million, and there is another resiliency projects, which is 6 station resiliency improvement for the station, increase all the critical rooms in the stations. The purchase of 110 low emission compressed natural gas CNG articulated bus totaling $107.3 million. The track and switch replacement in 4 different subway lines totaling $45.1 million. That concludes the capital program reports.
Questions or comments on the capital report? Hearing none, I'll ask Mr. Pachaki to present procurements.
Good afternoon. The procurement package representing New York City Transit procurements includes 10 actions totaling estimated $64.5 million in expenditures. I'd like to highlight one action in this month's agenda. The item is the award of a 60-month miscellaneous service contract to Fuji Electric of North America in the estimated amount of $46 million to recondition Fuji door operator assemblies for 660 R160 subway cars that contain the Fuji door systems. These assemblies, which are part of the subway door system, open and close the doors. They're approximately 14 years in operation, and these assemblies will require reconditioning to ensure continued reliability. The Fuji door operators continue to exhibit the highest reliability when compared to other door systems in the New York City Transit fleet. Department of Subways requested the reconditioning of these assemblies in order to support the SMS program, their scheduled maintenance system on the R160 fleet. Fuji, who's the original equipment manufacturer, will perform the reconditioning of the door operator assemblies in its facility located in Plattsburgh, New York. All subway car doors systems require periodic reconditioning, and this is the first time that the reconditioning will be performed on these door systems. New York City Transit does not currently have the expertise and tooling to perform this reconditioning in-house. However, removal and reinstallation of the door operator assemblies, both from and into the cars, will be conducted by New York City Transit staff. As part of this contract, Fuji will provide training and tooling to enable New York City Transit staff to perform this reconditioning in the future. Notwithstanding the requirement for the OEM to perform this work, procurement conducted an outreach to determine that no other manufacturers or suppliers of this type of equipment were capable of providing either the OEM parts or the authorization to recondition these particular pieces of equipment. Fuji's proposal was in the amount of approximately $48.4 million. Negotiations resulted in a price of $46.1 million, which represents an approximate $2.3 million in savings. Procurement and New York City Transit's cost price analysis unit, along with the concurrence of MTA audit, have determined that the prices submitted by Fuji and negotiated are fair and reasonable. This contract is subject to review and approval of the Office of the New York State Comptroller, and an award will not be made until such approval is received. I ask for your approval of all items in this month's agenda.
All of the procurement items are in the committee book. Mr. Merdler has a question, Mr. Albert has a question, and Mr. Weisbrod.
With respect to the Skanska procurement, we have not received for the last 5 years or so any indication of their continued compliance. Until 2013, we received a comprehensive audit on their compliance with the MBWE. It seems to me we ought to ask for one.
Good enough. We'll get it to you. Fine.
But I think you need to have one.
Mr. Albert.
Steve, I'm interested in the Bombardier item because you've got car types listed there that were built by Kawasaki and Alstom, yet it says Bombardier is the only supplier of these parts?
Yes, and we're talking predominantly, if almost entirely, about propulsion. A lot of the car manufacturers back then didn't actually have their own propulsion system, so they would contract it or subcontract it out. And in some of these instances, you're talking about Adtrans and other companies that were ultimately acquired by Bombardier.
So for our rather large portion of the fleet that was built by Kawasaki, you still need these Bombardier parts?
Well, Kawasaki happens to use other parts of theirs, and as a matter of fact, on the R211, we're seeing an Alstom propulsion system in there. So it depends on the marketplace and what's happening at the time, but you'll see different combinations of car builder and propulsion systems over time in different fleets.
Okay, I hope they aren't late.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Thank you. Steve, I also have concerns about the Skanska ratification, actually two different concerns. One, as I've said pretty consistently, I have a real problem voting for ratifications on work that's already been done. But I understand, at least, the need for ratifications on work that is uncovered during the course of a reconstruction project, as some of the work here is. But the wayfinding work, which is for all its merits to have wayfinding, is not an emergency, is the kind of scope creep that the construction task force that Scott Reckler headed really has always warned us about, and the need to, and the apparent just going forward with that work without coming back to the board and seeking a ratification after the work is done is, to me, totally inappropriate. And I note that that represents literally 50% of the proposed ratification. So I've suggested in the past that if we can anticipate to some extent some of the emergency work, and we should build in a contingency to some extent in these contracts so that we aren't being asked to ratify work that's already been done. But of even greater concern is the the scope creep that has been, as we all recognize, a significant scope creep. That is a significant issue for procurement and historically and something that we should really be guarding against as we try to be as efficient as possible in spending the public's money.
Yeah, I agree in part. Certainly, the wayfinding was contemplated from the very beginning with the stations, as it says in the staff summary. I think I've mentioned it a few times that the packages were not, the initial packages were not ready, the preliminary designs were not ready, so we had put them out on the street and contemplated possible change orders in order to enhance the stations and actually build them out with what was intended with regard to dynamic wayfinding. The issue was, while maybe not a capital E emergency as you indicate, it was certainly something we wanted to do while all of the contractors were mobilized there. There was a lot of extra work going on, and we were able to take advantage of being able to close the station and reopen it within the original confines of the station closures. We are working as an all-agency activity, all the agency procurement folks, law folks, as well as the project officers, to come up with addressing these issues in terms of how we would put forward change orders in a more expedited but yet transparent way. Next month at governance, I believe we're going to be presenting that recommendation for how we're going to handle change orders globally, utilizing contingencies and things of that nature.
And what I'd like to add, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Commissioner, is two things. Number one, particularly in light of, hopefully attracting the money to really push on with Fast Forward. I've said to my team that going forward, definitely for big construction jobs, I look at now I've had this discussion. I'd like to see more intrusive testing, so that you really do get, you can never be certain of conditions, but if we do more intrusive testing, you've got more chance to find any untoward ground conditions or other anomalies that might otherwise lead to a change order later on. So I want to see actually more test drilling and more testing and non-destructive and even destructive testing going forward. And on the second point, I've made it very clear to my team, and they accept this, that when we start to get into the real meat of Fast Forward, there will be design freezes, there will be cut-offs, and if you haven't thought of something, don't come back later and say, oh, can I just add this? Because the answer will be no. Unless it's a safety issue, if you've forgotten something, you should have thought about that earlier. We won't entertain late requests.
I appreciate that. I would just note here that we, as you're underscoring, Andy, we really, if we're going to get the public's trust on this, we really have to be much more disciplined about how we spend the public's money. And while all these things are good, and I can appreciate the challenges of uncovering issues on the spot that have to be, it only makes sense to address them at the time. With respect to adding items, I note here that these stations were first contracted out 2 years ago, and there was plenty of time, it seems to me, to, if wayfinding was considered an important thing to do, to bring it back to the board, instead of sort of blithely going ahead and issuing a change order and then coming back when the work was done. And I just really think this is, this is, again, 50% of this ratification, and not a huge amount of money compared to the capital program as a whole, but emblematic of the kind of issue that we have to deal with on both the capital side and the operating side.
You are 100% correct. I have no argument with that whatsoever. We need to sort that out as a team, and we will.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
I'm in favor of all but the ratification item, in which I vote no.
Okay. Is that the same for you? Okay. And then the procurements carry. Thank you. Now, ready for EEO and diversity, Mr. Andrews and Ms. Harleston, and I'll ask you to Make this as brief as you can, but focus on where we need to improve and what steps we are taking to improve.
Good afternoon. I'll just focus on a few activities that are not included in the material committees. These activities focus on our efforts to increase diversity at all levels of the agency, foster a culture of inclusion, and I might add that these activities are aligned with the Fast Forward People priority of engaging and empowering employees. At the end of calendar year 2018, over 1,300 managers and more than 300 operating supervisors completed an inclusive behavior workshop that was focused on unconscious bias, microaggressions, and how what we see affects how we think and behave in the workplace. It also emphasized the importance of creating and maintaining an environment where all people are appreciated and included. Additionally, over 2,000 employees have engaged in non-mandated, respectful, inclusive, and diversity-related programs at Transit over the past 3 years. Fulfilling a goal of ours of establishing a best practice for diversity and inclusion, New York City Transit is happy to announce that 8 transit employee groups have been established at the agency for the first time. We call them the TEGs. The TEGs are employee-led groups whose members are linked together by personal characteristics and/or shared interests. Our call for interest in these groups last year was met with a tremendous response, with over 250 employees expressing interest in creating TEGs. These groups are designed to support our business objectives, strengthen employee engagement and leadership development, and to promote a positive reputation for New York City Transit. Charters have been developed, meetings have taken place, and other activities have begun for the following TEGs: multi-generational employees, LGBTQ employees, multicultural employees, veterans, blacks, Hispanic, Latinos, disabled, and women employees. Moving along, a diversity dashboard structure has been established to provide management with information on tracking diversity and inclusion demographic information, EEO and Title VI complaints, and to support the development of action plans to improve representation, reduce complaints, and deliver on employee engagement and empowerment goals. Our recruitment team continues to maintain relationship with talent providers for skilled trade employment. And finally, I'd like to note that in October of last year, President Byford accepted an award from the National Business and Disability Council of the Henry Viscardi Center for his dedication to diversity and inclusion. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Harleston.
Good afternoon. MTA Bus continues to make progress in improving the representation of women and minorities in our workforce. During 2018, female and minority underrepresentation improved relative to availability. In the skilled craft, Hispanic males improved, and protective services, Hispanic female representation improved. As part of our broader diversity initiative, MTA Bus is taking our diversity celebrations to the street. As you can see on your screens now, these are photos from one of our first diversity events. It was the Black History Month, and we had it at Far Rockaway Depot. We had, just to mention just a little bit about this celebration, one of the bus operators is an artist, and he donated 11 canvas paintings for this celebration that were raffled off to the different employees. And so what we are going to do for the rest of the year is we're going to have diversity celebration at each of the MTA bus depots. They have been scheduled out for the year. For March, the next celebration will be held at College Point. MTA is cultivating relationships with the communities around our depots. During 2019, MTA Bus and New York City Transit will be posting exam schedules at local businesses and other establishments near the MTA and New York City Transit bus depots. That is my report.
Thank you. Ms. Vanterpool.
I just want to share a brief comment and then ask a question. The comment I shared in the Railroads Committee reports around the fourth quarter diversity reports, and it would be helpful for us over time to see a historical analysis of this progress. So every quarter we're seeing this, but we're seeing results over the year as you all are reporting for 2018. I think it would be helpful to find a lengthier time period, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, so that we as a committee and as a board can fully understand the progress that has been made. And then my question is very specific, and it's around the percentage of women in skilled craft in New York City Transit. It's 6% of women. And if you might just very briefly touch on what initiatives are either underway or in the pipeline to increase the representation of women in the skilled craft category.
Well, let me just ask my HR representative if she could come up and respond to that. Instead of representative, our Vice President for Human Resources, Patricia Lodge.
Hello, everyone. Okay. For the skilled trades with women, we continue to go out to the different schools. We have apprenticeship programs. We have mentorship programs. The numbers are low. They have increased a little bit, but we continue to go out and try to recruit women, try to make sure they're interested from a very young age. We've partnered with Transit Tech High School, and you'll be hearing more about them probably within the next couple of months as far as the different initiatives that we're working on with them. But our thought is that if we really reach these students and these women, these girls, at a very young age, then they'll be interested. We need to reach them, we need to reach their parents, we need to reach their guidance counselors, and really put in their minds that there are skilled trades positions, there are positions here for women, and get them interested very early. But it is a challenge, and it is something that we continue to work on.
Ask a brief follow-up. Are there any partnerships or relationships with any primary schools as part of this, trying to get, as you mentioned, young ladies interested in this as early as possible?
Okay, primary schools besides the Transit Tech schools?
Yes.
There are a few more what we call the CTE schools. So there is Alfred E. Smith. There's also some work that we're doing with the CUNY, with the City University of New York, to really try to make a sort of pipeline for students that are interested. So again, we're working from the junior high school level, the high school level, and also the college level. Most of these positions, though, you do have to take an exam, a civil service exam, to get into the role. So the goal is to, like I said, reach them from very, very early and put it out there that these positions are available for them. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.
It does, and one final. Any internship programs or summer programs that are in place?
Yes, we have a very, very robust internship program, a college aid program that we've had over 200 and something students, the majority of which are people and women of color. So that's something that's been very active for the last few years. We have it not just in the summer, but throughout the entire school year. And it's primarily for the college students, both undergrad and graduate. And then we also have, in partnership with the city, we have the high school internship programs. So yeah, there are quite a few internship programs. Okay.
Anyone else? And it really goes to the heart of what Ms. Van Tupool just raised with you. I have a perspective on this that goes back almost 8 years, having been on diversity committee and with Dr. Metzger having pushed the proposal before the entire board to have this not only be reported in diversity, but in all of our operating agencies. There's one thing that troubles me, and it always has, and that is the availability statistics. In every one of these titles, technical, professional, across the enterprise. Whenever you ask, how are these numbers calculated, you get very interesting answers. I would, in MTACC some years ago, before Mr. Lieber joined us, I asked that very same question. And I didn't get I think a proficient in 2 languages. And I didn't get it in either one that I comprehend generally. Okay. So let me suggest to you that to address the heart of this question, availability statistics and what we should be aiming for, maybe in the next presentation we should share with all the members of diversity as well as the board how we get those figures and whether they are in need of revision and revisiting. And let's leave it at that. Is there anyone else? If there is none, thank you for your report.
Okay.
And now the last word goes to President Byford.
Very, very quickly, Mr. Chairman. In terms of standard follow-up reports, commissioners, you'll find those in the book. There are a number within the committee book. In terms of in terms of outstanding report items, work is ongoing, and we will update you as soon as we complete any reviews. We maintain a log so that nothing slips through the net. And Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me also today, this meeting, Transit Committee, will be my good friend and colleague, my learned friend, I think I should call him, Jim Henley's last meeting. Jim has decided to take a very well-earned retirement after more than 12 years working for the MTA, including as General Counsel for the MTA and more latterly as our own General Counsel here at New York City Transit, but in an overall career of over 28 years serving the city, the state, and of course MTA and NYCT. In my year and a bit working here in what it's always a challenging environment, Jim, I've always very much appreciated your calm counsel, your wisdom, your friendship, and that will be sorely missed, and we wish you a very, very happy and long retirement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been very lucky, and I'm grateful to the Transit Authority and the MTA and Metro North for giving me the chance to have such a challenging and rewarding career in public service as a lawyer. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there is nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.